saying, can you just show once the introductory slide, the introduction slide, first single slide, the speaker slides, the project.
Sir, it's ready with me. Can I show?
Okay, fine. Okay.
Good morning, all. I hope I'm not late.
Yeah, hi Kamal, how are you doing?
Good, sir. Good.
You're statistically on time.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yes. Hi, Dr. Kamal. Good morning. This is Dr. Biplab this side. Can you hear me?
Good morning, sir. Good morning. Yes, I have muted myself.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Okay.
So Biplab is also from PGI and so is Vinny.
Okay.
And Ajitesh is basically from Bombay. He's working in Geo right now.
Right.
He has a specialization in legal aspects of AI.
Right.
That is very exciting too, that's very important now.
Yeah, we kickstart. This is actually our first webinar of the subsection. We've been planning it for months. So this is our first inaugural webinar. Hopefully we should have.
Sir, we are live on YouTube.
Okay, sure. So I think if we just let me know, Smita, if the president or the secretary will be joining. Otherwise, we can start maybe another 2 minutes. We'll wait.
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you are. Another minute and we'll start if nobody else joins. We have attendees have started joining. Okay. Shall we
Sir, you
start,
can start the webinar.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Morning, one. So welcome to this series of webinars from the Telehealth subsection on behalf of the Telehealth subsection webinar of the subsection of the Indian Academy of Neurology. I welcome you all to this series, first of the series of the webinars we are going to start. Well, needless to say, on what best could we start from the technology side on telehealth to talk about artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence in the field of medicine and also neurology has taken the world with a sweep, and we are right now riddled with questions on artificial intelligence, ranging from diagnostics. We know that's already in diagnostics. We've been utilizing it in diagnostics for the last few years, but now the big challenge which has come up is to understand the validity, the understanding how AI would be useful to us, and what are the things we need to be careful about with artificial intelligence, and a lot of questions, many questions which have been creeping up in minds of all physicians, neurologists, and the world in general. We've all been riddled with a lot of queries. And especially with the onset of the generative AI, the most famous one being the generative pre-trained transformer, what you call as the GPT, Chat GPT, what we know as Chat GPT. And we will have something on Chat GPT today. So in today's seminar, we aim basically to have the basic understanding of certain aspects of AI. We can't cover it in 1 hour. And in the subsequent webinars, we will be going into in-depth aspects of AI, maybe applications, and so on and so forth. Because AI is a very rapidly evolving field. So it's that we now are soon going to have a special journal by NEJM. It's coming up with a special journal with NEJM and AI, which is going to be launched in 2024. And many journals have started sections on AI. So just to wasting for time, I have with me the convener of the Telehealth subsection, Dr. Biplab Das, and I hand over the session to him to start introducing the speakers. Biplab.
Yeah, hi, sir. Thank you for, and good morning, everyone. So as Sarah has already said, this is from the Telehealth subsections of under IN, Indian Academy of Neurology, and there will be series of webinar, and there will be series of for AI based what we can do for the applications of AI and impact of AI in neurology as such. So we have wonderful speakers lined up today. So without wasting time, so it's a pleasure to introduce Vinny. So Dr. Vinny and myself we did at PGI from PGI Chandigarh. We did the neurology residency. We were the batchmate. And welcome Dr. Vinny, and he is the professor and heading AFMC in Pune. And so his qualifications, he has done. And so the most important thing is that he has keen interest in artificial intelligence, and recently he had some applications which is based on AI, and one of these things is like neurological disorders, differential diagnosis, and all. So he has multiple publications, including publications in NEJM. And I welcome Dr. Vinny. Yeah, Dr. Vinny, hand over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Biplab. Is my screen visible?
Not yet.
Not as
Sorry.
yet. Not as yet.
No.
You have to click on the share screen.
Is it visible now?
Yes, sir. Put it on slideshow mode.
Is the screen visible?
Yes, the screen is visible, but PowerPoint is in viewing mode. Yeah.
It's okay now.
Yeah. I hope I'm more audible.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So thank you, Dr. Khurana and Dr. Biplab, for giving me this opportunity and the kind introduction. Today, I'm going to talk about the nuts and bolts of a AI, artificial intelligence, or a machine learning paper. And to cite an example, this is a paper that we have. So this paper had recently come as recent as a couple of months ago, and this was written by Microsoft and OpenAI. And this talked about how GPT-4 can address the medical challenges that we face today. And this was the paper that had come into the news also because they showed that if the US MLE exam was to be given by GPT-4, then how the GPT-4 could crack it with pass percentage which was far higher or at equal terms with a medical student taking the exam. So I'm going to talk about how to interpret a paper like this. So today, as we see the artificial intelligence, we see it from the perspective of a piecemeal approach, where 10 blind men are looking at the same thing in different angles and interpreting it in different angles. We as neurologists are attuned to taking infinite possibilities from the myriad of variables associated with the patient or a clinical scenario and distilling that huge amount of clinical variable into a definite tangible diagnosis or an outcome. And that is what we've been trained to do. And artificial intelligence has been making forays into this domain by observing patterns. So we have to a little bit of background on how AI works for medical applications or anything in general is by observing the patterns. Like when we learn language as a child, we observe the patterns that are inherent in what we hear during our childhood, our parents speaking or our class teachers speaking. And from that, we kind of infer a pattern, and it is this pattern that we actually employ in deploying that language, even without understanding the grammar behind it. It is akin to how we learn during residency, unlike the undergraduate program, where the logic is in the undergraduate program, the logic is taught to you, whereas in residency, the logic is kind of generated by seeing more and more examples of the same kind of patients or patients with the same diagnosis, each patient being a little different from that. And the resident learns to generate a logic which he then applies in his practice independently. So in a sense, artificial intelligence, which is exemplified by an artificial neural network, is something that takes an input, and the input may run into multiples of thousands, sometimes even million, and abstracts a pattern from that input and uses this knowledge of the pattern inherent in that huge data or big data to give a meaningful output every time new data is presented to it. So this is an example of how the figure of 9 is broken down to its individual components of 784 pixels, and these pixels are fed into a neural network, which are those layers that you see after the first layer. So they each layer has a function of kind of delineating a portion of this 9, and the combined output of multiple layers is that it is recognized as a number 9. And this is an example of a real neural network perceptron, which is a computer model, and this is how it works. So you paint a figure of, say, for example, 8. It is broken down to its individual pixels and fed through the layer of networks to be recognized as the real number. So in essence, an artificial neural network takes a new patient data and applies this data into the memorized patterns, which in artificial or machine learning language is called a model. And this model gives a predictive output. The predictive output can be a diagnosis, it can be a triage, or it can be a treatment specification. So this is essentially how an AI workflow happens. And consider this article, which appeared a couple of years ago, where AI was used to screen for diabetic retinopathy. And after this paper was published, this AI model actually received an FDA approval. So this is one of the few AI models that has an FDA approval associated with it. So, we had recently written in the AI in Review about how to approach such a paper. And we had proposed that a few questions should be asked whenever we are critically appraising a paper. And the first question that should come to everyone's mind is, was the study prospective or retrospective? Was it observational, or was it a randomized controlled trial? So you'll be surprised to know that most of these AI papers that are published, very few, you can actually count them, the numbers, the percentages are in actually single digits, which are randomized controlled trials. Most of the studies are either retrospective or observational. So if you see this model was designed on 3 retrospective data sets, which are Dyer DB1, Kaggle, and an Australian data set called Tele-iCare. Now, using these retrospective data sets, the model was trained, and then it was deployed prospectively in a patient in a field trial. So this is an important information, but even when it was deployed in a field trial, it was not a randomized controlled trial. And the importance, there is an importance between when you deploy it single-handedly and, and you kind of publish the results in terms of the accuracy of the diagnosis versus when you are actually comparing it with, for example, an ophthalmology trainee or a neuro-ophthalmology trainee or a neurology resident. So as a corollary to this, now the clinical trial guidelines have included a Spirit AI extension, which further specifies what are the things that should be included in an AI trial. And one of them is to clearly specify whether the trial was prospective or a randomized controlled trial. And the second is whenever such studies are published, the consort has come up with a consort AI extension, which also includes aspects to include when such a trial is published. And the associate question along with this is whether the objective of the study or the protocol of the study was stated before the study had actually commenced. Because it is very easy to fall prey to the fact that you avoid the negative results and selectively report what came out positively. And this may be erroneous in interpretation, and especially when such models are put up for FDA approval or are deployed at scale in the field. The next question that is important to be asked is whether this data that massive data, like the data set of diabetic retinopathy I showed earlier, whether this data was split between a training, validation, and external data sets. So this is how it works. You have a training data set, like in diabetic retinopathy, you had those 3 huge data sets. And this training data set is used to train the model, where the model kind of imbibes the inherent patterns which are inherent in these training data set. Now, this model is given us completely different data set to validate the results. And then once you have an adequate validation, then the entire model is exposed to a totally different kind of a data, which it has not been exposed to before. So you will find that some of the published AI literature or studies have shown, if you critically analyze them, you will realize that there has been a mixing of this external data set and the training or a validation data set. So if this happens, because it is very easy for an AI algorithm or a model to kind of remember patterns from the data it has been already shown. So if you use such an AI to actually externally test on the similar kind of data set, then the results are bound to be erroneous. And when such a model is deployed in the real world, like if you are testing it on a training data set which is mixed with the external testing data set, so the kind of accuracy results that you're going to get here, when you deploy such a model in the real world, you will find that the accuracy will drastically drop because of inherent bias in training, validation, and external testing. The next question one should ask is why was the data set obtained in the first place, and what was its size? So the ground rule is that the larger the data set, especially when it involves imaging and CT scans, MRI, the larger the data set, the better it is in terms of accuracy and prediction. And the question as to why the data set was obtained in the first place. Like suppose you take a fundus photography from a clinic which is only seeing hereditary optic neuropathy, and you infer this pattern gained from this training data set to a stroke population. So the results you're going to get is going to be totally erroneous. So it is very important to know that the training data set, what was the split or what was the constitution of that training data set? They said how many of those training data sets had strokes, how many had diabetes, how many had hypertension, how many had hereditary condition, and whether this kind of distribution was skewed in one way or the other, and that has major implications in the interpretation of its results. So, for example, this paper had come in NEGM. The AI was used to detect papilledema from the ocular fundus photographs. Now, this the authors or the journal they have not revealed as to what was the constitution of this training data set. They have just said that this data set was used, but they have not gone into further detail as to how many of it actually was because of a raised ICT, how many of it was sarcoid, or how many of them were lymphoma. So this kind of distribution was not, even because all of these can actually present with something like initial picture looking like papilledema. So this was not discussed in the paper, or maybe that data was inherently lacking from wherever they got the data set from. The next question one should ask is, what is the intended use of this model in the context of the clinical pathway? So you can use this AI model or any AI model created for either a diagnosis, to triage in the casualty, or in an emergency, or in a natural disaster, or you can use it for outcome prediction as to what the outcome of stroke going to be, for example, or you can come out with treatment recommendations. This may not be so relevant in neurology as of now, but if you remember, there was a computer called IBM Watson, which had become very famous because of having beaten chess players and the Go champions. Now, this was being used in medical oncology to give treatment recommendations. Now, this was used as an alternate or a second opinion to an oncophysician's chemotherapy regimen. Now, it has miserably failed in real world scenario. So it is important to know as to where this ML model is going to be applied in the clinical series. For example, if the paper says that this was used as an adjunct in diagnosis, so that's where it is. The interpretation should not be a hyperbole. You cannot say that something that was used to screen diabetic retinopathy will replace the retinal surgeon or the ophthalmologist from the casualty screening. So you should be very careful as to what is the exact point in the clinical pathway where this model is going to be used. The next important question to ask is, does the data set represent the disease spectrum in the target population? Like, for example, when this algorithm or this model was tried on a different ethnic population, the accuracy results had drastically dropped because the training data set it had used were more to do with Caucasian and I think African population. And when it was used on a completely different ethnic population, the results were not as good as it had shown in the initial population, the test population. And so also if the spectrum, for example, if it is trained on say 1 lakh retinal images, and the data set is divided between diabetic proliferative retinopathy and a normal disc, and there is nothing in between. Now, the stages of diabetic retinopathy that constitute the in-between spectrum, if it is not there, then it is going to give you, this model is going to give you very false positive results. And what was the type of ML employed? For example, the ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a self-learning model. It doesn't require a human intervention. It can take data from the internet, the whole World Wide Web, and it can learn by itself. Whereas most of these diabetic retinopathy and papilledema papers that have come, they required a human intervention to kind of guide the ML model or the AI model to perform better. So it is important to know as to which one it is. Of the two, it is a self-learning model which is most difficult to kind of interpret as to how it has reached this decision. So these are the various kinds of artificial intelligence, and you can see that this on the left is a simple neural network, and as you add layers in between, this becomes a more complicated AI algorithm, and this is called a deep learning neural network. The more complicated it is, the more difficult to understand the inner workings of the AI model. It's also important to know whether the model is continuously learning or continuously evolving or continuously learning by design itself. Like Dr. Biplab was mentioning that we had created an application where the resident could come up with a differential diagnosis to the symptoms and signs fed into the application. But this kind of an application was locked to a particular date. And this was not like if you had accessed the same application 2 years from its origin, the result would have been exactly the same. So in that sense, it is not evolving. But there are same is true with ChatGPT. Like ChatGPT 3.5 will the results may not vary till the next version comes out. But unlike this, there are continuously evolving AI models which will go on changing depending on what information it was fed. Suppose if ChatGPT were to learn from the questions you had fed or the information you had fed ChatGPT, that would be a continuously evolving model, and such models one has to be very careful as to what the result is going to be, because today's result or the published result will vary from the result that is going to come. It may vary for better or it may vary for worse. And the next question is, which performance metric is used? So remember that the lingo used in AI models versus the medical language is slightly different. Recall in ML papers actually is equivalent to sensitivity. Precision is equivalent to positive predictive value. A confusion metric is nothing but a contingency table 2 by 2. And a gold or reference standard that we call in medical language is called by AI engineers as ground truth or label. Now, there were occasions where the AI model was able to circumvent the tedious process of imbibing the inherent patterns bit by bit, example to example, and then it started learning the shortcuts. For example, it learned that an X-ray fed to it is likely to be pneumonia based on the fact whether this X-ray was a portable X-ray or a proper X-ray. And it learned that if it was portable X-ray, it is more likely to be pneumonia. So it used this kind of a shortcut to learn. And similarly, there was a paper in Nature where the skin photograph of the skin lesion was fed to the AI model, and it was able to detect whether it was cancerous or not. And it performed almost at par with the dermatologist. So here again, it kind of learned that if a scale was present in the picture, or if there was a marking of a scale in the skin picture, then it is likely to be cancerous. So these are shortcut ways where it can learn. So this is also something one should be wary of. And finally, is the study repeatable or reproducible, or are the source code data sets? For example, OpenAI has come with ChatGPT. Now, ChatGPT has cracked the MLE exam at par with human candidates. So can you reproduce this? That's a big question mark, because it has not actually taken a proper MLE exam. What it has taken are the sample question papers from which were previously published. And did OpenAI reveal the source code of the program for scrutiny? No, they have not, and they are still kind of dilly-dallying, and I don't think in the future they are ever going. So as against this, there are some published papers where they have made the training data set public, they have made the source code public, and they have even included the errors coming out of it public. So this is again something that is more open source and more kind of made public. Data set where it is made public is likely to have more lasting and reproducible results. And this is what I was mentioning too, like the ChatGPT 4, here it is completely opaque. They have not told us as to what is the outcome. Now, does the AI intervention actually affect patient outcomes? Now, the papers may show very superlative results of 90% accuracy, 95% accuracy, but there are very few studies where the AI model is actually competing with the neurologists on ground. And there are practically no studies to actually kind of assess whether there has been a outcome difference in the patient's clinical scenario. So as long as the model is not making any difference to a patient outcome, it is kind of, you have to take it with a pinch of salt. So these kind of studies are actually lacking in literature. Maybe in future, these studies where the patient outcomes are making a difference will also probably come. And what we understand by a black box problem is that when you feed a skin lesion or a photograph of a skin lesion to the AI model, and it spits out a diagnosis that this is cancerous, there is no way of knowing how it is working actually. So the in-between layers from input to output is actually a black box, in the sense that even the AI engineers who have designed such an AI model are clueless as to how it is. So these how it is kind of spitting out that result. So you cannot actually query the internal process pipeline, and it is a black box in that sense. And this has implications in accountability. Suppose an adverse outcome comes, who will be held responsible? Will it be the doctor, or will it be the AI or algorithm, or will it be the engineer who's designed the AI algorithm? And one must remember that there is always a bias, because, for example, ChatGPT has learned from whatever has been published on the internet or freely available on the internet. Now, what is available on the internet is colored with a lot of bias, either racial bias or human bias. So all these bias have been incorporated into ChatGPT, and that is the reason one has to be very careful as to what kind of training data is being used for. And this is the Gardner's hype cycle, where there is always a peak of expectation followed by a trough of disillusionment, which is eventually followed by a slope of enlightenment and a plateau. These are famous words from Sir William Osler. AI is listening. I wonder whether we are. Thank you.
So thank you, Dr.
Thank
Vinny.
you. Thank you so much. Yeah, Biplab, please. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Vinny, and wonderful presentations. I think we will have lots of questions for you. I mean, we'll take the questions at the end of the 3 sessions. Yeah, Dr. Khurana, sir, please.
Yeah, so we, as Biplab mentioned, there are going to be a lot of questions, I'm sure, within this interesting start and interesting set of lectures to follow. So thank you, Vinny, for setting up the tone for the webinar by introducing us to the basics. Now we go to our next talk. Can I have the introductory slide, please? So I have with us today my colleague and friend, Dr. Kamal Kishore. He is the statistics person in PGI. He's an assistant professor in the Department of Biostatistics. And his areas of interest are data science, machine learning, AI, and data visualization. Number of achievements, including an ICMR GRF, and has a first rank of the best published paper in the research day of PGI. So I invite you to talk on the various aspects where AI can help us in research and statistics, which of course is a big question these days, because students are always on the lookout for using all the help. So is AI going to take over for the biostatistics? Kamal.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that wonderful introduction and the query. So as you were, am I audible and am I visible? My screen? First question.
Yes, go ahead.
Right. Thank you. So as sir was also pointing out that artificial intelligence and generative AI, especially maybe ChatGPT, Bard, Midjourney, DALL-E, Llama, these are the tools which are sweeping, or we are in the middle of the tsunami of these generative artificial intelligence. So many of us are concerned about it. So when I got the call from sir to speak on AI and ChatGPT for research, I was very happy. And then I started preparing. But you see, language is such a complicated, and then you have to define each and every aspect. I was expecting a standard 1 hour session for me. But then when it was communicated, it was 15 minutes. Now you have to tailor your talk to the 15 minute, right? So that is what you need to see. There are so many complications and the rules of the game. We cannot evaluate or weigh anything with one single set of maybe predefined notions or rules, and how these rules are changing, and what are the concerns which basically arise out of this generative AI. I thought then I'll address this. Then I changed my presentation. So no, it will not be on a traditional sort of academic presentation, but sort of my thought, like how generative AI is going to be help, how we have reached up to this stage. Hopefully you will find it interesting. Let us see. So in order to discuss about the generative AI, first of all, we need to know about the human history of learning. So when we started our journey, we started same in the food chain along with the animals. So there, we looked at the pattern in the nature, we started learning. And then eventually maybe our ancestors, when they were fighting in the food chain, maybe for their survival, so they realized somehow this realization happened. They are not the strongest. They are not the apex predator. So they choose to be wiser. So then came the second stage in the learning, and then is relearning. You need to, when your environment is changing, you have to relearn some of the things. It's not by the rote learning you have to go. You have to adapt and improvise. So that is where the relearning came. And the third stage in our evolution was learning, relearning, and unlearning. Maybe some of the concepts or observation which we already knew now has to be changed. Environment is changing, or certain other characteristics is changing. So we have to unlearn that pattern. But you see, previously, when you used to learn something, learn it by heart, learn it repeatedly, but then unlearning was comparatively less, because there were initially in the beginning, same rudimentary path we were taking. There was not much rapid progress which was happening. And this was what most has happened in the entire course of our evolution history. But if you talk about today's time, we are in the era of hyper learning, hyper unlearning, and hyper relearning, where whatever you have already learned is already changing, or conventional wisdom is being changed. Immediately, you know any language, it is getting obsolete, and then you have to unlearn it and then relearn something else immediately. You are into a certain profession, it is getting obsolete, you have to modify, and then you have to relearn something. So that is why you must be hearing now the concept also as upskilling and reskilling, basically. Okay. So when we talk about the hyper learning in stage, first of all, we need to decide that what was the watershed moment in the human progress. There were many, indeed. Okay, this is what I have selected, basically, that what I felt was comparatively were the watershed moment in the life. There are many. You can take many other examples. And the first was the reading and writing. Yes. First, when we learn to speak, we can pass on the information to others through speaking, through maybe just gesture and other thing, but still the development was not that rapid. Now, when we develop the ability to read and write, then after that, the knowledge spread faster than the previous communication era. Now, this led to a foundation-based mechanism available to each and everything. And the next generation was not reinventing the wheel. So read and write lay the foundation of many development. Then came there were many innovations which happened, but at the heart of it lies maybe two types of the fuel: electricity, petrol, diesel, or some sort of this type of the fuel. So this is a sort of a generative technology or the requirement which is at the heart of many things. The car you drive, maybe the phone you are carrying along with you, the electricity at home, many things. So these are at the heart of those things. So this was another watershed moment. Now, the current one, which is internet and artificial intelligence. So our paradigm is changing very shit. Internet and AI is the recent addition, and it has happened in just last 50 to 60 years. And even the majority of changes are basically happening maybe even after this, in this current century only. Before that, yes, there were progress, but it was not accelerated. So now we are on a hyper lane, actually, in the very fast lane. See, evolution has put so much of pressure on it. If you compare our evolution history, if you compare it to a 24-hour clock, so then for 23 hours and 59 minutes, we were actually living in the paradigm of learning, unlearning, and relearning. Whereas if you talk about the 39 hour and 59 minutes till that was the notion actually, which was prevalent in us. But as soon as AI comes, and that is even a fraction of even the last second of a clock, if you can think. So now these conventional wisdom, these were challenged by this, which perhaps we were not let it go. So knowledge was considered as sacred. It was confined to the ivory tower of few individuals and institute. So people used to guard it. And you have to vouch for it or train for it. And it used to take years. So we closely guarded. But as internet came, now the information or the knowledge is available on the internet, or it is at your fingertips. This is the one conventional wisdom which is changed. The second thing is our conventional wisdom. We say that expertise takes time. You have to practice repeatedly, so work hard for it. Whereas nowadays, there are ways through which can be accelerated. Some steps can be obsoleted, and learning should always be individualized. So that is what these tools are giving us. So this again is the conventional wisdom which is changing. From the very beginning, I do not know whether evolution has put a pressure on us. So we saw everything with the suspicion. So we put everything onto the tools, on the weapon sort of. Let us say a dagger is harmful, or a knife is harmful, or maybe atom bomb is harmful. But we tend to forget everything every time that it is the person who is holding that knife or the button actually who is going to press the button for atomic bomb. A knife at the hand of the surgeon is a lifesaver, whereas at the hand of the robber or a thief is a life threatener. So similarly is with the generative AI, at least till today. So now, as Sir was also specifying, and previous speaker also highlighted, there are many concerns and other things. And yes, we need to move cautiously. In sociology, there are two concepts which are very interesting. If you remember, or if you're able to recall, it is accommodation and assimilation. Accommodation is when initially some new species or new tool used to come, there is always a forceful struggle. Just like husband and wife, newly married couple, each one of them try to put a stronghold, right? And then there's fight. But then after a certain point of time, as you progresses over a time, you become mature. And then we accept the boundaries of each and everything, and then assimilation happen automatically. That means automatic. So perhaps we are in the stage of accommodation with the AI or generative AI. But the one thing which is plaguing its adoption is the conventional wisdom. Knowledge is hard, you have to work, and all those conventional wisdom, number one. And another which Sir said is the Gardner hype cycle. We are living in a hype cycle that it is going to take away the jobs. This was the same with the computers also, that the computers are going to take away the job. But human beings are very poor at looking at the multiple aspect of the problem. We look from the unidimensional perspective, not from the multidimensional perspective. And that is where the machine can help us learn maybe the multidimensional perspective and then make a move forward. So we look at the narrow aspect of it, and then we take the sides. We divide into the binary category that yes, it is harmful or it is not harmful. But this is not how in a nature or how the things in reality work. It is affected by, there are many n number of factors which works together, which probably we do not weigh. And as I'm a statistics person, we should always remember there is some set of anomaly or error in the system that is always there, that we can never eliminate. And that is the trigger point, either for the dooms or either for your upliftment. Now, the another problem which we are facing with the generative AI, since this was a niche area and we do not have any structured program also for this, we are adopting by looking at this. This is having the capability. But most of our knowledge is coming through Twitter. We are just looking at the Twitter, or somebody have said on the personal anecdotal experiences. And most of you people are aware, even in literature, if you see, when you say about a personal anecdotal experience, in the hierarchy of evidence, that lies at the bottom of the pyramid, right? So, but then we don't have the structured program also, which we need to design and we need to go forward in order to do that. Coming to the real question, generative AI, is it a threat or not a threat? To tell you frankly, I do not know whether it is a threat for the time being, because as per some people, the AI may achieve singularity. What is a singularity? A singularity is a point beyond which we are not able to understand what AI is doing. So far, we are able to understand what it is doing, but as per the conservative or maybe the estimate, we are going to achieve the singularity by 2047, but I do not know how it is going to happen. But the trial, like what Elon Musk is going ahead with, we do not know that by that time human becomes as a superhuman. That also is, we do not know. Many things are there in the pipeline. AI is a threat. Now you can look at these 3 prompt or generative AI maybe feed which I have given it to write something. If you look at these 3 feed, now this is what I'm feeding into the Chat GPT or Bard or Bing or any other generative AI tool. This is just like language. Here, my expertise is coming to the picture. Tool is not doing anything out of the ordinary. It is doing exactly what it is supposed to do. Previously, this thing was done by the calculator. Calculator was also held responsible for taking away our memory, will become weak in calculation. But if you read The Fast and Slow Brain by Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winner, so there he nicely put it, we are not good at calculation, mathematics or statistics. And even the statisticians are poor in statistics. That is what their original finding has conveyed. So we developed the tool for it. It's as simple as. Now that capability we have taken to the another level, to the natural language processing. So it can produce us some coherent output for you. But ultimately, I look at it this way, it could be another way. So previously, before this generative AI, natural language processing capability, we used to take, if you remember 80-20 principle, we used to take 80% of the time to generate the first draft and maybe 20% of the time to improvise the draft. But now you can reverse the process. You can take 20% of the time to generate the draft and 80% of the time to improvise and refine the draft. Depends upon how you look at the problem. So, but generative AI is not yet doing itself the things. We are at the helm of the affairs. Considering all those discussion in mind, what are the take-home messages? I have 4 take-home messages. The creative tools are always shining and ever-changing, whereas the creative process is eternal and never-changing. Creative process is thinking of the problem, as Sir, previous speaker, was also mentioning, whether it could able to elevate the patient problem. That is what we need to see. We should not get smitten by the tools. Tools will come and go. Like if you people remember, previous generation, they used to say, write with the column which is made of a wooden things. Then came the holder. Holder was with the nib, and then backside of it used to be a wooden. Then came the time of the ink pen. Then came the time of ballpoint pen. Then came of another things, color. So, but these were the tools. These will always keep on changing as to the changing needs. So we don't have to worry as such. AI is neither a problem, not a part of solution for every problem. We need to identify the problem and we need to implement the solution, maybe either using AI tool or either using AI or any other non-AI thing to solve the problem. But our attention nowadays is shifted towards the tool, which should not be at the center of affairs. AI is definitely going to solve a bigger problem. You're going to launch maybe a rocket or maybe advanced thing. You need to do complex calculation and you have to write long algorithm, have to do many calculation, which is not humanly possible. That AI is going. But at the same time, AI is going to create a problem. You shut down the internet today, entire system is down. You can look at the insurmountable loss of life and financial obligations. So it is going to create the bigger problem, no doubt about it. The final take-home message is just outsource your labor. Don't think that the generative AI is going to generate a draft for you, which is a standard draft. No, ultimately you have to curate it. You have to give it a personal touch and you have to give a message to the audience. But yes, it should be used maybe to generate the first draft, for which previously maybe we were taking 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour. Now we can at least reduce that time. That's all. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Kamal, for cruising us through the aspects of AI in research. And now I request Biplab to introduce our third speaker.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Dr. Kamal. That's a wonderful presentation. So we go to the our third speaker, Dr. Ajitesh, and it's over the just years, the AI has so much of impact, not only in neurology, it's everywhere in our day-to-day life activity also, the huge potential we have. And that's how the conflict has started. And it's very important to know what are the legal issues can happen. And that's how we request, we welcome, we are really eager to learn what are the legal things can happen from Ajitesh Shani. So he's a legal executive to Geo Platform Limited, and his area of interest has been artificial intelligence and the law, exciting, and data protections and fintech. Welcome, Dr. Ajitesh. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry. Thank you,
Hi.
Dr. Das.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. And thanks for having me here. It's really amazing to delve into this critical and very timely topic. So before we start, I just want to emphasize that this part of the presentation is very different from what the other two speakers have spoken about until now. It's amazing that they've set up a context for me, but I just wanted to be clear that this is not legal advice. Rather, it's to shed light on some really common legal consideration and complexities that we have to see while we are looking at the regulation in the space. So just moving on to the first slide, let's start the intersection of AI and the legal aspects of it. So in this presentation, I'm going to discuss the regulation of AI, the need for regulation of AI, what currently governs AI in India, and then go on to discuss about the importance topic, when it comes to AI in healthcare. So I won't be going specifically in neurology because, coming from a legal background, it's very difficult to know a lot of things about neurology, but I'll look at healthcare as a general thing, what's happening in this space. So let's say in this era that is defined by technological advancements, the integration of AI in healthcare is transforming the medical profession completely. We can see that. And with that, there are a myriad of legal implications that the hospitals, the professionals, and then, end of the day, all the patients are going to face. So starting with what is the first global, what was the global buzz right now about regulation of AI? There are countries who are regulating it in and out. India is thinking about that. We have a lot of papers coming out on this, right? EU, for instance, has recently come out with the AI Act, which says that, we want something like GDPR, which is the, the Data Protection Act, which says that, you have to protect the data of people, because end of the day, right now, AI is not evolved to something that we see in the movies. It's not the iRobot. It's not something that we've seen in Asimov's novels, right? This is still, we are looking at data, complete data. This is what Dr. Wilson also talked about earlier, because this is data going into a black box where we don't know what's coming out. So what right now people are doing, or the countries are doing, is they're trying to regulate it. Now the EU regulates it. India says that, we have Niti Aayog. We're going to come up with, a couple of principles. We want Digital Data Act. UK is doing that, US is doing that. But end of the day, what is really happening? The regulation is happening only on a very the eagle eye view of it right now. So when you look at proper legal implications of this, no one is really trying to regulate that right now. In my opinion, that is probably because regulating it legally from the very beginning is going to stifle how AI is coming up, because it's going to stifle the creativity and the novelty that the AI brings to this space. So what is regulation of AI really? End of the day, it's these 5 things. First is biasness and fairness. So let's say AI systems can inherently be very biased. They can have very discriminatory outcomes, and ensuring fairness in AI decision making remains a significant challenge. The data quality. So we know that AI relies heavily on data quality. The kind of data that is fed to the AI in the very beginning, in the first stage, is what is going to come out when you use the AI on the real life cases, right? Third is transparency. So many AI models are complex black boxes. It's great that we have a very good understanding of what black boxes are. This makes it a challenge to explain the decision because of the black boxes, but how AI is coming up with certain kind of solutions. Then there comes ethical concerns. So what are the ethical uses of AI? How is it related to privacy? What are the consents that are taken? What is the surveillance that remains? And finally, we have security, which is a basic thing that is being regulated right now because the AI systems are really vulnerable to attacks. There are a lot of hackings that happen. There are a lot of adversarial manipulations. There's so many things happening right now. People are hacking into the data sets. They are feeding wrong things to AI. And that might lead to a lot of difficulties in the coming time when the AI grows a bit further. So ensuring the security of AI application is crucial. And it's a very critical domain. What currently governs AI in India? Right now, because we don't have an AI Act and the Digital India Act, we don't have it as of now. Currently, AI is broadly governed, not very specifically, but broadly governed by the IT Act and the newly introduced Digital Data Protection Act that we recently saw was passed in the monsoon session this year. So I'll just share with you a couple of sections. This is just for information. I understand it can be a little bit intimidating to look at sections like that, but the IT Act has something called a section 43A and 72A, which you might want to look up. Just do a little bit of research, you'll understand what they say. The implication of that is that when AI commits any crime, who will be liable? Because right now there's no liability in if AI does something, there's no liability on AI. Because people who are using it will be liable, manufacturers who are manufacturing it will be liable, but the AI itself cannot be liable. So that is the first part. The second part is the Digital Personal Data Protection Act. Now, this becomes a little interesting legally, because for the first time, we are now talking about defining the word automated. Why does this mean anything? Because AI systems are capable of making decisions without human intervention. So until now, we were saying that because they are automated, they don't have a legal personality, we cannot hold them for anything. But for the first time, we have come up with a definition for automated means, which shows that in cases of data protection related issues, AI could be held liable. Now, what that means is a completely different topic. It's a completely different, at least a half an hour of discussion on that. So maybe, I'm not going to delve into the details of it. But of course, this recognition is it's implied in the sections, and it's processing a very long known reality. It's a very broad definition. So, for instance, it's going to affect things like machine learning systems or the LLMs, which are the language models, and the computer vision systems as well. So it would be intriguing to observe how this plays out with the new act that might be released by the government of India in the coming times, the Digital India Act. Now, since the act is proposed to cover a very high risk and medium risk issues, it's not going to be it's not something that we should be commenting on right now, but it's something very interesting we should look forward to, because when we're looking at regulation of this space, we're going to see what is the implication of regulation and AI on us, on doctors, on healthcare, on patients, everyone. So going on to the next slide. what is the importance of this topic? Why are we talking about it right now? So we know that, first of all, before we delve onto the specific, let's understand that these are not just the three things that are important for this topic. I have curated this, especially, taking in mind that we're talking about AI in healthcare. So, first one is, we have AI driven medical tools, which are becoming very prevalent in India right now. We have enhanced diagnostic accuracy treatment planning, and we have, different hospitals have been using different things. For instance, I remember Tata Memorial is using a cancer treatment center, something by IBM Watson's Oncology, some software on oncology. So the AI-powered tool is to assist oncologists in treatment and planning for cancer patients. So they are using it to plan on how the treatment is going to go further. So people have been using it, and a lot of tools like that have been used in other hospitals as well. Second is, as doctors harness the power of AI, they must also grapple with the legal frameworks that are evolving to address the unique challenges. So understanding the legal aspects of AI in medicine is crucial to ensure patients' rights, uphold ethical standards, and mitigate potential risks. Now, what does this mean? Now, for example, let's consider the protection of a patient's data. Now, adhering to the data privacy laws, such as the DPDPA that we spoke about right now, it's not just a legal obligation, but also a fundamental ethical principle. Now, it safeguards the patient's sensitive information and preserves their right to privacy. Also, it erodes the patient's trust and compromises the doctor-patient relationship. So, therefore, a deep understanding of this legal framework surrounding AI in medicine is essential for delivering high quality and responsible healthcare. The key considerations for when you're looking at AI entering the space of healthcare, what are the key considerations? I think the top of the list is the data privacy and security. So you just bear with me on this. This might seem a little bit complicated. I try to make it as easy as possible in a legal language. So a very high level of compliance is now required when it comes to data privacy and security, something that all healthcare institutions and professionals should be aware of. And apart from healthcare institutions and professionals, it's also everyone else, literally everyone else in this country have to be aware of this right now, because this applies on every person who is collecting their data on their laptops or digitally, even some people who are even collecting it manually. So in an era of advanced healthcare technology, the responsible handling of patient is paramount. We just spoke about that. Indian doctors leveraging AI in their practice must navigate and, they have to navigate the intricate landscape of the data privacy security. The Act obviously covers the processing of personal data, the new Act, including health data. Now, I'll give an example to, give you a better understanding of what data privacy and security I mean. So imagine a scenario where an Indian doctor is using an AI-driven medical diagnosis to assist in an early detection of diabetic retinopathy, right? Dr. Wilson spoke about it. What happens when you do a diabetic retinopathy? It is great that we spoke about it earlier. We are going to take up the medical history of the patient. We're going to take some laboratory test results. And then we are also going to look at the patient's retinas. Why is this important? Because biometric data. We are collecting biometric data, which is sensitive personal data. So this data is essentially for AI algorithm to analyze and make accurate predictions regarding the risk of the condition. The collected data first falls under the category of health data in the new Act, as it pertains to the patient's medical conditions. And this is a sensitive information because it is also blood glucose levels. It also, the data would contain the prescriptions that they are taking, and all the other sorts of biometric data that's being collected right now. So before collecting and processing this health data, it is important to make sure that hospitals and doctors are obtaining explicit and informed consent forms, in my opinion. Now, explaining these consent forms would explain how the data that they are going to take is going to be used by the AI system in diagnosis and planning. This is a very important safeguard when you are, using AI tools and you're having patients come in and everything is going on well, but there is a certain need to safeguard yourself also, because tomorrow something wrong happens because the AI predicted something else because of a different data set that was fed to them. The liability is on the doctors and the healthcare institutions right now. The manufacturers may be liable because you would say that if in case the tool itself is failing, the manufacturer is liable, or if there is a update which is failing, it's the manufacturer's liability. But when it comes to a failure in diagnosis and using of the tool, the liability falls on doctors and health institutions. So since the data is collected and related to health of Indian citizen, it falls also under the data localization requirements of the act, which it requires that whatever data you're collecting as a hospital, as a collective, has to be stored in India. So there are hundreds of different compliances that are going to be very important and something that have to be considered at this stage, because having AI be part of a normal life is something that we have been looking forward to since the 1950s. When we started looking at AI, we started looking at different tools that could help us. That's when the AI research has been going on for. But right now we're talking about data, and the data is the main thing when it comes to AI. Second, I'll go to the informed consent. I just spoke about it. Why is it important? It takes away the liability. So in a legal context, a patient's signed consent form explicitly stating their understanding and agreement. The use of AI in the medical care serves as a crucial legal document. Now let's take for an example for another case that I happened to read this case once when I was traveling, and so this is a case about some specialist cardiologist who had to analyze a lot of images, I don't know, some cardiac images. And prior to the procedure, the hospital, they had a very well-established informed consent process. So they took all the consents, they had everything in writing, they gave that to the patients, they were providing very, comprehensive information of the AI tool and everything. It so happened that one of the patients experiencing chest pain sought medical attention. And after a thorough examination and discussion, he was recommended that why don't you use this AI assisted diagnostic tool, and let's see what comes out of it, because there will be a better chance of figuring out something from AI, because there's nothing that the doctors are not able to give them a proper just like a very detailed analysis of what he wants. So the AI tool then identified a potential issue in the images, and they just like they said that why, because you have the AI is figured it out, this is something we should go forward with. And like, okay, fine, they got all the everything done. But so it so happened that the condition of this patient worsened with time, and instead of getting better, it just like it came to a time where he was not able to function, just general functioning. Being dissatisfied, he went and sued the hospital, he sued the doctors. Now what happens in those situations? Why would the doctor be sued? Why would the healthcare institution be sued, you'd ask? Because you're taking those informed consent forms. And this is one thing that saved the institution and the doctors. This allowed the doctors and the institution to argue that they have followed all the established protocols and informed consents, and the patient is well informed. So there's no legal or ethical implications on them. Having something like that at a very early stage, thinking like this at a very post-mortem of AI. This is a post-mortem stage of AI, as we call it in, in the legal language, you call it post-mortem of AI. If we can think about these kind of situations, and we can think about when and what is going to help us safeguard in the future, because this thing is suddenly going to, come out. This is just like fire. It's just going to blow away in the next few years. So we have to think about that in a certain way. Third is, it's a rather interesting topic. This is a liability of what happens when something that AI does goes wrong. So the question is, can doctors be legally responsible for the decision made by an AI system? And if an AI system tool provides incorrect information leading to harm, is there any way that the doctors and the hospitals can safeguard them, or will they be liable only? So doctors, let's say, they have a very high standard of care. I'm sure everyone over here will agree that, when it comes to like patients coming to doctors, they have this feeling that, they're going to get the best advice, and the doctors have to hold themselves to the highest standard of care, and they have to be like, just at their jobs all the time. And this is just a normal practice, right? And what happens if a doctor fails to meet those standards? So when a doctor incorporates AI into a decision-making process, they assume the responsibility also for the accuracy and appropriateness of the AI tool that they are using. So if the AI tool provides an incorrect information and leads to harm, the doctor may still be held to be liable. Let's consider a case where, say, for instance, a radiologist is using an AI software to interpret some CT scans. Yes. And the AI tool is designed to highlight potential anomalies and abnormalities, right? The radiologist relying on the AI's recommendation, if he determines that a particular, the lesion is benign and says that, we don't need any further investigation, but it turns out that, it's actually malignant. What happens in that situation? In this case, the patient is obviously going to come and he's going to sue, and all those problems are going to happen. Currently, that's all over the world, but talking specifically in Indian context, there is no liability on AI systems in any kind of law. So reasons for that: AI lacks any legal personality. For any criminal liability to be on a person, the person has to be a person, a human being. He needs to have a legal personality. AI does not have that. So they can never be liable. So what happens? You're going to shift liability. The liability is going to either be shifted, as I said, to the manufacturers or to the doctors. And the manufacturer is going to be like, my tool was right. It did what it said it would do. So if you are diagnosing, if you are using the tool, the liability falls on you. So this is also something that you have to really take into account. There's a lot of accountability principles, legal precedents on it. It is essential to recognize that while AI systems themselves cannot be held criminally liable, all sorts of human beings who are involved in the process can be held liable for this. So the legal landscape surrounding AI is evolving, and the AI technologies continue to advance. The legal frameworks that are there may have to be more adaptive. As of now, they are not. And however, we have already AI tools being used in hospitals. So we have to be really wary of this. Another point is intellectual property, the next point. So this is rather interesting from the point of view of this talk. There's doctors involved in AI research or development. I think there's a need to be aware that there can also be a lot of intellectual property issues that might be created with introduction of AI, into a general healthcare institution. The thing is that if they contribute to the creation of AI algorithm or tools, they should also understand the legal implications, right? So doctors and researchers in neurology may develop AI algorithms or tools designed to tasks such as, analyzing MRIs and CT scans and predicting neurological disorders. There are already patented innovations in this regard. For instance, there are doctors and researchers who are currently developing algorithms or tools to analyze these things and see, if we can, in advance, we could figure out what kind of problems might happen in certain situations. IBM, for instance, has developed this AI algorithm which predicts the Alzheimer's disease. So in 2019, I remember IBM had released this one particular AI algorithm, which was granted a patent, by the way. And the thing that it did was that on the very onset of Alzheimer's disease, it was using neuroimaging data, and it was using all these things, checking out the patterns, identifying what all risks are associated with it, and it came up with diagnosis and timely interventions that we would need. So researchers in India have already been working on this, and this is something that we should really be thinking about. What happens in situations when AI is going to generate more information, is going to have its own mind, the neural networks are getting complicated day by day. I'm talking about the neural networks within the AI, because that's how it works. What happens when there is, you have to now collaborate with this AI? Who gets the authorship? Is it the doctors? Is it the AI? As of now, there's no copyright for AI in India, at least. There's no copyright for it. So that is one part. The next is the ethical considerations. So in the field of neurology, there's a lot of dealing with sensitive patient data. There's, as discussed earlier, there's a need for informed consent, but also there has to be a lot of consideration related to data privacy and patient, being aligned with, what kind of things have been expected of them to divulge the information on. So because the Indian Data Privacy Act has a lot of different rules and regulations that have to be followed. Even if you are, you're not lawyers, if you're not looking at those rules, you would still be bound by them. The same as, saying that, if there is a murder, no matter who you are, you're bound by them. The same thing with data privacy as well. So a lot of legal and ethical principles have to be emphasized. Currently, there are two things that have happened in our country. One is obviously the act, and second is the Puttaswamy judgment that came out a couple of years ago. And it has marked privacy as a very fundamental right. So things have now become serious. Privacy is now serious. People are now talking about it. They're taking it very seriously, and there's going to be penalties for not taking it seriously, for not doing the compliances. What is a way to mitigate them is a question that might arise. You can make a lot of collaboration agreements. You can have your privacy policies in place. You can have data security measures. You have regular updates, things like that. These are the things which your lawyers or people who are a little bit more acquainted with this space would be able to help you with. And finally, I think this is also rather interesting, the malpractice insurance that currently a lot of hospitals and doctors have. I think doctors have this because an individual insurances that are carried, New India Assurance gives one of them. So what happens now what happens when AI does something goes wrong? Who's liable? Again, right? Liability is on us. The liability then also extends to financial liability. So it is important at this point not just to look at how AI is evolving, it's also how the landscape is evolving around doctors and institutions, because you'll have to see what kind of insurance the service providers are giving. Does it involve medical malpractice and insurance for AI related issues or not? That is something that you should really be seeing at. I'll just quickly summarize before closing my presentation. The first thing is there's an Indian legal framework that everyone should be aware of. There's the Data Protection Act and the IT Act that is going right now. The Digital Data India Act is going to come later. This is important because it's going to safeguard data and ensure transparency. There's a big role of doctors in responsible AI, which they have to, this has to be taken seriously, because the kind of research you're doing and the kind of research you're feeding the AI is the kind of results the AI is going to give later at a later stage. And obviously, there is intellectual property awareness, which is required. So for doctors involved in AI research or development, this ensures that their innovative contributions are recognized and protected, as copyrightable something or as something patentable. And finally, we must also remember that the core of our legal and ethical obligation lies in upholding patients' rights, providing transparent information. And as a legal profession, I would encourage you to, continue seeking clarity on this ever-evolving space. This is very new. And if you have any further inquiries, you should take legal guidance immediately, because the space is evolving and it's going to be of major implication to you. So that is it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ajitesh, and wonderful and very, very important points you have raised because of, legal issues which is be there, and enlightening us these points. And this platform, although it's a very short time to explain all the things, and so we have this platform is open for questions and discussion. Any questions from participants? And
I think let's first ask all the speakers to switch on their videos before we can have. Yeah, thank you. And that was truly an insightful, much needed, insightful talk, Ajitesh, because there have been a plethora of queries from the medical professional side about how to deal with most of the issues that you talked of. And like you said, it's more evolving. Things are still not clear. And there are some areas in AI where we are regularly using, for example, imaging diagnostics and acute stroke. For example, there's a software called Rapid. We are using it day in and day out, and but that's quite an objective way of triaging patients, which Vinny also talked of. So if there are any questions, can we have, are there any questions posted, Asmita, as yet from the attendees?
No, sir.
Okay. So, anyways, we can still have a discussion amongst ourselves. So let me just throw out the first question. So Vinny, you talked of papers. It was again a very, very, I would say, in-depth introduction to AI and how the AI generates its patterns from the pattern recognition. So how would you end up recognizing, for example, I asked my resident to write a thesis or a paper, and that comes to me. How will I know that, and I'm not told. See, one is a plagiarism check, which I have now understood that even AI can take care of plagiarism too. If you tell it not to have plagiarism, it'll take care of it and it'll bypass the plagiarism. So is there a way? So Vinny and maybe then Kamal can also give in his comments.
So to the best of my knowledge, OpenAI had a tool which could have been used to kind of detect any AI component to the literature that has been generated or submitted to you. So that tool was till recently, I think it was free. So that is one option. And to say, see, on a broader perspective, the generative AI like ChatGPT is taking the text from the net and producing it. So in a more philosophical term, that's a very broad scale plagiarism, so much so that many authors have gone to court, recently sued ChatGPT or OpenAI for plagiarizing their work. Like there is a prequel to the Game of Thrones that AI has come up with, and the author has kind of sued the OpenAI saying that this is plagiarism.
Okay. Any addition to that, Kamal? Would you like to have any inputs? We deal with this day in and day out now.
Yes, sir. So Turnitin has now made the provision to detect plagiarism, AI-generated text. And as sir was specifying, this Eureka moment happened with me also last week. I gave the text to ChatGPT and it produced something out of the internet. Fortunately, I have read it. So that is why I could able to trace it out that it is happening. But I think over and above the tool, we should not over rely on the tool. The number one thing is we do not know yet the sensitivity and specificity of the tools. And both of the, as the other speaker was also saying that this is evolving field, yet we do not know. So how we can actually see is we can look at the pattern, how it is being discussed, because somewhere it is pumping in some of the information. Is there non-coherency actually in the text, maybe going from first text? So that is where our, I think, intellectual maybe now knowledge may be tested more comparatively. But as this is a rapidly evolving field, it is very hard or difficult to say anything for the time being. But my personal views are somehow that if you're going to stop it, people are going to use it and not declare it. Rather than like now ChatGPT have given the provision, we should ask the resident maybe to use it and check that what AI has generated, because they can share the link with us that what they have generated using this thing, and over and above what they have done actually then. Maybe so that part we're thinking and logical coherence and how they have come up to that text, then it's fine actually, because ChatGPT automatically cannot write anything. It's just like a language. It's just like a language where if you give it a text such as a jargon, write something about the neurology, it will produce something, write about the detailed disease specific or patient specific. So it will keep on modifying, sir. So that part is there. We need to tell them structurally how to get the best output and how to modify it.
What about dealing with a certain phenomena? You know, GPT and AI also hallucinates, as it's called. There's hallucination. That means it. I'm sure you're aware of this. Hallucinating with the AI, it may generate false information. It just creates information without any sense. And so now is there, and it also detects it. If you ask another question, the other question might detect that this was hallucinating. So how do you care of that? Anybody, Vinny or Kamal, how about, has it now, you said it was a self-learning, ChatGPT is self-learning. So has it now learned to stop hallucinating?
So I feel that the hallucination comes from the absence of a data. So it's like it is
True.
confabulating in many ways. Confabulate.
It confabulates. Yes.
Yeah. So if like from ChatGPT 3.5 to 4, the degree of confabulation may reduce because it has more fund of data. So future iterations, the hallucination problem may actually come down. That's what I.
The way, sir, I think I look at it is confabulation. Basically, we human also does actually, but we become very pricky if someone else does it. If I committed the mistake, then it happens inadvertently to err is human. But if somebody else committed, it is his or her fault. So I think we are like taking the discussion on the other side. Ki it is committing. It's a tool. It's as simple as that. We are forgetting this thing. So it is generating something. So the kind of input you will be giving, so the kind of output you will be getting. So now when we talk about the prompting or the type to get the outcome, that is what like we are teaching in our course also. Are we doing first of all the prompting or are we doing the blind prompting? So there is something as a zero shot prompting. There is something as a few shot prompting. There is chain of thought prompting. And similarly, there are different type of the prompting and you can mix and match. And the chat GPT and all these generative technologies using basically floating weights, which is nothing, maybe you can think of it as a regression actually, where there are weights to the certain X by Z variable. So these are floating. So what ChatGPT and these models are doing, if I'll say write about neurology, it will pick some sort of a general weight. If I'll tell it write about the neurology for the junior resident or the medical trainee resident, it is going to refine, it is going to give the more weight to the targeted audience. And if I'll add something, I am having 10 years of experience in research and I'm a distinguished professor working in a maybe neurology department and I need to generate maybe the PPT for this thing, it will further going to refine. So this is changing weight actually. So, and we should use it as an assistive technology rather than like taking it as key. It is the supremacy which is guiding us. No, we are guiding it. And then after that, once we get that the first primary response, then after that also it is our duty as my Dr. Ajitesh Soni was also talking about, right? So it is our responsibility to cross-check again and again because we are producing the text on our behalf. So fact-checking it, everything, that is what we tell our residents and other things also. So I think those are my takes. So we should not accept blindly whatever it is giving us.
Yeah, so that's one thing actually. So this is a question for Dr. Ajitesh. What's your view? Because we had weeks back, we tried to use the AI just for making a prescriptions. You see the patients, you try to make a prescriptions for a patient, and you find that there's a mistake in the drug's name, right? So how do you see this one legal point of view? Because if you say if in the bottom of the prescriptions you write that we give a declarations like it's a AI generated prescription or sort of thing, but at the end, how do you see whether the responsibility will be with the doctors, as you already mentioned, few of the things, and also you see because it's a so much of complex things taking a decision as far as legal is concerned. It's quite new thing. Who will be more responsible? So how do you see this one? I mean, to use this one in applied neurology, in a very simple applied neurology, making prescription sort of things.
Definitely, this is very complex because the first question you have to ask is that did the patient know initially before taking the prescription that this is by AI? That's the first thing. Now you say that they probably he knew and he already everything was written down. Still, the patient is coming to the doctor is telling them to use the AI tool. Or if people who have this website, they're going, there are a lot of websites these days. People are going online, they're getting prescriptions out of there. So what happens if AI is choosing a prescriptions? You cannot come and say that, if something went wrong inside my body, I cannot go and say sue AI. How will you sue AI? What kind of criminal liability would you put on them? Can you put them in jail? You can't do that. You can shut them off. What does that mean? So these are a very broad topics that you can discuss intellectually. End of the day, the liability falls on the doctor. The liability falls on the person who is behind the tool, who's the person who set up this tool. In this case, if the website developer, the person whose website this is not a doctor, then it's his liability still. If it's a doctor who is, showing his name and saying that, you come take prescription for me, and there's an AI tool can give you normal prescriptions, take a Dolo and this thing is done. Dolo is still okay. What if it says something, something like something more heavier than that, a couple of steroids, and if that does some problem inside your body, what happens then? So the liability will always, until there are obviously, changes in our laws, and we are able to figure out on how to have these AI tools responsible, how to held AI responsible, the liability will always remain on us. So that is how I take it.
I just one point, because usually like we do in reporting of electroencephalography, EEG, or X-ray report, you usually see, downstairs there is a declarations, which is it's not for medical legal sort of things. Does that really help in practical? Whether it's if you declare also, you take a sign, and does that really protect the person, the reporter, whether the radiologist or a doctor?
Yeah, it does. So that's very different from, what we spoke about in terms of AI tools, because this is imaging and you're telling them these are the terms and conditions, and, someone is complying by them. As long as they know what they're complying by, they can never take up an issue saying that, we had no idea what was happening. They're already writing them down. But this thing works differently when it comes to an AI technology, because at that time, there's a lot of other complexities that also play their part. So we have to look this not from just one specific legal lenses. You would look at them from an ethical lens also, and this is something we call responsible AI. So we have to see it from that lens. And then, who is liable till what aspect? Is it the people who are feeding the AI this kind of information? For instance, today you are putting things on Twitter. AI is learning from that Twitter.
Yes.
It is learning bias. It is learning everything from Twitter, and it is coming out and giving you answers for that.
Exactly. So that's how I'm coming to Dr. Vinny. You said also earlier. So AI, whether it's a ChatGPT, it's what we are giving the information. They're taking the information from the available, whether it's a Twitter, anything. So there is so much of bias which is there. So the information is a half wrong. Half truth plus half truth, which is equal to wrong. You agree that point, right? So how do you see the potential of reliability in the long term? So how do you see this as a potential threat to a neurologist, writing a prescriptions or neurologists in practice, day-to-day practice down the years?
Yeah, as a threat to the practice of neurology as in prescribing?
Yeah.
Okay. So I feel that, though they have OpenAI has not declared it, but there are allegations that it has actually taken academic papers from SkyHub, which are behind paywalls. So that is how it is able to crack the MLE and other academic diagnostic challenges. So if that be so, with the coming, and the last ChatGPT was trained till 2021, if I'm not mistaken, I may be wrong with the year. So with every year, more and more literature is getting published, which includes CPCs, which includes case reports, and neurology discussions and everything. So all this, if fed into ChatGPT, it will learn and get better and better. But as I said, even today, if you see an Airbus 320 can take off on its own, an aircraft, and land on its own. But still we need a pilot to be sitting there. No, it is possible even today for an aircraft to take off on its own, taxi on the runway, take off on its own, fly the path, and land on its own without a human intervention. It is possible. But no passenger is going to take that and sit in that aircraft. So something like that I foresee for neurologists and AI also, because the patient will never trust never trust that AI alone output, and it will always be a complementary activity.
Yeah, agree. It's a more complementary actually. Yeah. Yes.
We have one question, Dr. Arunjit from PGI. He asks how we can optimize intelligent prompts to get optimal results in ChatGPT, and are there any online courses? So I think Kamal, maybe you can answer this.
Sir, yes. the online courses by Professor Jules White, prompt engineering, I think that goes by the name of prompt engineering for beginners, and prompt engineering for advanced data analysis are available on Coursera. They're wonderful courses. And we are also coming now in the PJ also with offline courses where we'll be offering a 2-day course on ChatGPT for data analysis, a foundation course, then a 2-day intermediate course maybe for data analysis using ChatGPT that will be exclusively on data analysis. And then how we can personalize ChatGPT so that it is going to mimic your personality, sort of an advanced course. So this 2 are almost, we are ready with the foundation and intermediate, but advanced one we are working on. So hopefully you can see some offline teaching also. That is what we are feeling, that in this space, there is a lot of noise, but we are not getting some answers and where to learn actually. So that's what we are working on right now. But 2 courses on Coursera for the time being are very good. ChatGPT for the beginners and prompt engineering for the beginner by Jules White, and another is advanced data analysis by Jules White, is wonderful course actually to attend right now.
Thanks. And so another question which I had in my mind is, one is we are concerned about the paper completely being written by AI. Now, second aspect, which I think Vinny touched upon, is also we have registry data. So registry data, which can be huge mountains of data, maybe a national registry, for example. So how can we utilize that, and which would be ethical to use data from a registry which is ongoing, and we feed it to AI to generate certain patterns and to generate maybe the statistics, which of course you said that there are courses on statistics. So what are the ethical issues involved, as well as the legalities, of course, if Jitesh can talk of that, in utilizing data which is already there in registries, for example, and which gives us outputs more than the automated Excel outputs which we can get from some databases. I think both Vinny and Kamal, if you could provide us some insight.
I feel that the registry we already have, and that registry exists out of a consent. And as I understand, that consent was not for use of AI application.
Yeah.
So that my take, I may be wrong, is that you have to take an express consent for creating an AI model out of that.
Well, actually, in registries, consenting is not actually a mandate. What I understand from the ethical aspects, when we take a hospital registry, for example, we inform our ethics, and a lot, because this is all anonymized. The data in registries is anonymized. So we usually haven't been ever taking data for the registries. You may not take the consent. That's what my understanding has been all these years. Maybe Kamal, do you have any comments on this?
Yes, sir. So if we look at now the changing landscape and the ChatGPT, now ChatGPT has come up with the 3 of their versions. One, which is free to use. Another one is premier single users, for which if I have to pay $20, so somewhere maybe it comes around $1,200 to $300 per month to use it. And the third one, which they now recently introduced, because there was a lot of this stock and industry was not ready to plunge onto this ChatGPT and other things, and ultimately they are running into the losses, so they have to make it as a business successful model. So they have come up recently now with the enterprise edition also. So the enterprise edition, companies can negotiate with them and they can purchase, they can use that, and ChatGPT is not going to use the data for training. It is a proprietary data of the company and you can develop the model for yourself. So that is where they are heading right now, into this direction.
Okay, excellent.
So it's
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, please go ahead.
Your question pertained to using the existing registry to create something new.
Yes, some data which can give us more information on that, or maybe give us new ideas. See why we use databases to provide us with numerous information. It may be when you go for a registry, it may be a planned registry, or it just may be a hospital registry from which you can take out multiple sets of data. For example, in a stroke registry, you can probably look at what were the certain outcomes, what was the demographics, and you could probably look into certain factors. But usually you have a certain set of questions that are answered in the registry, but not all the questions are trying to answer a certain set of research. So if that data gets generated and gives us a certain newer information, that could also be one of the things we could use. That's exactly what I wanted to know. How all can data be utilized, and if
maybe, sir, the one way which I can also think of, if you're looking from that perspective, so maybe now the AI model is basically having so many models are there basically. So what we can do is, without going into the chat GPT, now since they have data analysis part also, so what we can take is anonymize some dummy data set which your registry is having. Let us say you generate a sort of fake data or a dummy data, and maybe run maybe artificial intelligence and all those maybe algorithm on that kind of the data. Now, ultimately, it is going to give you an algorithm, Python or SPSS script or whatever. Then if you want to run it in your maybe separately in a Python or in a desktop other thing, you take that program actually, what it has written, and then apply it on maybe your repository or data the way you want to. So that is also possible. That's another way.
Vinny, you had any further comments?
Now, I think there's a little bit of implication on what just was said. If you make your own data, if you're even using your anonymized data, there are other 100 new compliances that would also have to be taken care of from the very initial stage. Say, for instance, now there are new AI governance tools which are being set up when you start feeding data. When you take up these anonymized data, you're making your own data set. You're making a small cluster of, say, for instance, all the patients who are coming to PGI. So you're going to make your own new data set and say this is only for the patients who came to PGI. You will also need to have a governance framework in place. So that is another level of compliances and financial implications. I just thought there's something that should be aware of.
True. I think that's where the legalities we need to be really start getting concerned about. So we have another question. Somebody, Ashutosh Tiwari, asks us, are there particular career options for medicos in AI? And that's a very relevant question. I know of some of my friends and colleagues who've actually taken up courses in AI and possibly are planning to work in AI. So can anybody answer that? Career options for doctors in AI? Well, like I said, there are some courses running into a few months, which are at least available in Bangalore, what I heard, and they can be taken, like a few of my colleagues, and have taken up those courses and completed certain qualification in AI. Arunjit Singh, we've asked you a question. Do you have another question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
So good morning, sir. Sir, I am Dr. Arunjit from School of Public Health, PGI, Chandigarh. Firstly, sir, thank you for having this wonderful talk on Sunday morning. Sir, I have a question. Sir, about 3-4 months back, the Department of Telemedicine in PGI had organized a 2-day offline workshop on AI. And being a medico, sir, with no prior knowledge of Python and other softwares which are required to use the training data and then subsequently develop your machine learning models. Now, as a doctor, sir, with very basic understanding of mathematics, I started learning Python. But, sir, with no success, because it's a fairly complex kind of a software, sir, and I was self-learning. Now, my question here is, sir, is there an ecosystem that exists in our country where, like, I have a training data, I contact a resource person or any agency, give, and the person helps me out, and then we build a ML, because we need to think about it, sir. PGI is a good hospital. It has got all the facilities, but what about other institutes where no such facility exists?
Would you like to answer, Vinny or Kamal?
Right, sir. So his concern is very genuine, since it is very evolving field also, and there is a lot of hype also around it. And youngsters especially are very, very optimistic about this technology, and they just want to maybe utilize it or grab it or learn it. And definitely it is always better when this field is evolving, so then the learning happens gradually along with the field. So once it is developed beyond a certain point, so that your point of learning becomes too high, and that's a letdown also which is happening. So in that case, but what he's saying is maybe technical know-how and other things. This technical know-how was available in the engineering institute as per se previously, because these are highly sort of code-driven or mathematical languages. But that is where now the artificial intelligence is heading, that I cannot write machine learning algorithm, but this generative AI, where I tell it I want to do this and generate a code for me. So that is where we are heading. So it is going to generate the code for him also. Any machine learning special, maybe your statistical analysis or any particular random forest, gradient boosting, or any specialized maybe technique he wants to use. So it is going to generate a code. But now where is the problem coming? Where he can get help or where he needs the help or expertise is whether the code has been written correctly, how to feed the data. He or she is getting the code, but then how to feed the data into that code, and whether the code which has been generated, whether it is executing the same thing. Because as far as with my limited interaction with ChatGPT and generative tools, and even with the humans also, when we communicate, when I say something, it may not be exactly perceived by other person or interpreted same by other person as what I am communicating. So that is where we need to put some guardrail. We have some memorandum of understanding, and maybe with the IIT teams and other things also, but it is very premature. Everybody is busy. So as such, I do not see a quick solution to it maybe. So AI and perhaps generative AI may bring in some sort of solution in another 2-3 years. But as far as the time being current, maybe it's difficult.
I think that also opens up the answer to the question that about career options. Somebody who trains himself or herself with a medical background and AI would be much sought after career, and some things which, working in biostatistics and medical backgrounds may be really able to provide greater insights, help, and answer such questions that we have. So that may open up a new profession in our fields.
It also, to create a model, you also require a very high computing power. It cannot be done on our desktops and laptops. Like in IIT, there was a project we were collaborating with IIT. So they also require to lease their high computing center, and that runs into a few lakhs. So it's not like even if you learn Python, and you cannot do it on your laptop or MacBooks. You require access. This access can be through an online basis, but it costs money.
And another thing, sir, which I may like to add here is, see, when internet has become available, internet was hailed as the solution actually, which could have solved many problems. But over a period of time, I do not know whether it was the solution or it has become a problem, because we can now access everything in the internet. It was overly hyped in the beginning. But if you now look at this scrolling other thing, how business model work, how it evolved, how it changed, there are so many things at work. So we should take it cautiously. And yes, insightful career options are definitely there.
Okay, and I think we've exceeded our time by at least 50 minutes from the proposed time, and it's time we should wrap up. So thank you, everyone. It was, I think, a great session we had for the first session for the telehealth subsection, and excellent learning we've had from everyone. Thank you, everybody, and have a great Sunday. I think we can now.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.